Well, it looks pretty good, doesn't it? By taking away the trade barriers, the common market has allowed industry to expand in all the various common market countries. And also, by taking away trade barriers, it's meant that since 1958, there's been a great increase of trade between the common market countries, and also between the common market as a whole and countries outside the market. And then again, by the expansion of industry and more trade, it's also meant that the people who live in the common market have had more work and have had more pay. But there are, of course, problems as well. You can't take away trade barriers overnight, because if you did, then some of the industries which would find it hard to compete might collapse, and that would be most unfortunate. The thing has got to be taken step by step. And again, there are some countries in the common market which have higher wages and higher pensions than other countries. And these countries with higher wages might find it hard to compete with countries with lower wages because goods might cost more to produce. Well, nobody wants to see their wages go down, or their pensions for that matter. And the idea behind the Rome Treaty setting up the common market was that wages and pensions should be pushed up to the highest levels. But that can't happen overnight. So let's have a closer look now at the main problems which the common market has to deal with. First, there are the industries which might find it hard to compete. This small scissors factory in Germany, for instance, where everything is made by old-fashioned methods. These firms will have to be helped to modernize their techniques. This Belgian coal mine has actually had to close down because it wasn't efficient. But the common market helps workers to go to new jobs and get training for them if their old jobs pack up. Or if there are lots of people unemployed anywhere, they're helped to find new jobs. These are Italians who have no jobs at home in southern Italy, and they're working in German coal mines. As long as a job's been offered you, this work permit allows you to work in any of the 6 common market countries. Then there are the places where there's no work at all, like southern Italy. There, the land's poor for farming. And most of the people stand around with nothing to do. Here the common market is trying to set up new industries to give them work. It hopes to get rid of the poverty there, the overcrowding, and the slums. Thirdly, there's farming. If there's no more protection from tariff walls, how can these small farmers, and in South Italy and Germany particularly, they farm on a very small scale and work with old-fashioned methods, how can these people survive in competition with the big, mechanized farms of France and Holland, who produce food much more cheaply? The common market has still got to solve the problem of farming. It certainly has to teach these small farmers to use new machines and produce food more efficiently. But it's got to give them all the help it can. Well, now let's go over some of these points again. First of all, in places where industries have collapsed or where there's unemployment, the common market helps people to find new jobs. Then, secondly, in places where there just isn't any work at all, the common market has set up new industries, as in Italy. And thirdly, there is special help for small farmers with special problems. So the common market then has really meant knocking down trade barriers, expanding industry, and special help for small farmers with special problems, and for other people who have special problems because of the new changes. Well, those are some of the facts about the common market. But what is it actually like to live there? Well, here in the studio is Monsieur Jacques Champagne, who is a French journalist. Monsieur Champagne, could you perhaps first tell us, has the common market had any effect on the old distrust between Germans and French, say?
Certainly, I can give you a striking example. Take Strasbourg, for instance, which is a main town on the frontier between France and Germany. Well, in the past 50 years, all that happened there is that troops, French and German, stood on each side of the border, facing each other. Now, last year, I went through Strasbourg by car. I was simply waved through, no passport, no customs, as though France and Germany would have been the same country.
So they know a lot about each other all the time?
Oh, certainly.
And what about the young people, the younger generation? Do they still feel national differences as strongly as they did before?
Well, because of this, and because they are younger, much less than my generation, for instance. But certainly they are conscious, particularly in the smaller countries of the common market, that they have a window opening up on a vast area in Europe and not just simply their own country.
And do they move about a lot?
Very considerably indeed, at all levels. Workers, students, scientists move about very freely from one university or factory to another in each country.
Now, what about the ordinary person in one of these countries? Can he see any actual differences brought about by the common market?
Oh, certainly. Let's take one example, agriculture, for instance. If you cross France, you used to see the old peasant pushing his plough behind a horse. Nowadays, what you see is that the younger farmers are pooling their resources and fields together and working them with tractors. This is a very striking thing for France.
Another thing I want to ask you about was the movement of people to different jobs. Do you get many Italians, say, in jobs in France, or Belgians in jobs in Germany?
Yes, certainly, particularly Italians in great numbers, and particularly in the building trade. But instead of having that migration of labor, Italians to France or Germany, individually, it is now organized by the institutions of the common market, so that they have a job to go to.
They have a job to go to. Have people, in fact, lost their jobs in the countries themselves because of this labor?
No, on the contrary, it's been made in such a way that the jobs given to an Italian in France, for instance, or in Germany, is for the benefit of both countries.
Well, thank you very much, Monsieur Champagne. Now, we've got some idea, then, of the impact this has had on people living in those countries. And we've seen today how the common market has meant that the countries have been growing closer together, as Monsieur Champagne has shown. And also, it's quite clear that the common market is going to be a very rich and strong unit. Well, the tariff war at the moment then divides Britain from the continent of Europe, from the common market countries. And as I said at the beginning, we in Britain have applied to join.